Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my latest live stream. This is live stream 25. Would you believe it? 25. So if I did about 2 hours approximately for each one, that's almost 50 hours of me screaming down the camera at you about safety, about spacecraft, and about STAMP and STPA and CAST. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please comment below. Let me know where you're watching from so I can get an idea of whereabouts in the world this message is being received. And of course, let me know if you're watching this on LinkedIn, YouTube, or even Facebook. That would be really cool to know. If you don't know, my name's Simon Whiteley. I'm a system safety engineer and accident analyst consultant from the UK. I specialise in STAMP, STPA and CAST analysis. And this live stream is intended to share some of my work, some of my experience in the context of a spacecraft case study. My intention is to run a live free complimentary session where we can get together live on Zoom and talk about STAMP, STPA and CAST, and I can answer any questions that you've got about the methods and how they can be applied. And of course, we're going to be talking about it through the lens of space, but if you want to come along, you don't have to work in space, you can work in any industry. I've been fortunate to work in a lot of different industries, so I'm sure we'll have something of common we can talk about. And if you'd like to do that, please join the waitlist. And to do that, if you visit my website, which is Whiteley-Safety.co.uk, if you visit the website, there we go, if it's working, there we go. And you can join the waitlist by clicking on this button here. It says free workshop. Stick your name and email address in there. You'll join a waiting list. And then when I'm ready, once I've finished doing these live streams and I've put my case study slides together, I'll send an email out to the waiting list and we can all get together on Zoom and have a great time. And likewise, if you would like some foundation training, I do provide a one-day foundation training, which essentially compresses a lot of the principles and theory into one day. So if you don't have much time, that should be good for you. And also join the waitlist for that. I'm going to release some new dates for those public sessions soon. I've been rather busy with a lot of things, a lot of exciting things. Some of it I can't talk about, unfortunately. But when I put the dates out for those training sessions, I'll send an email to the waiting list and we can get you booked on there. So anyway, and of course, if you need some help now, please visit my website, press this green button. I need help now. Send me a message. We can set up a call. I'd rather we spent 5 minutes having a conversation and I can answer your question than you spend 6 months banging your head against a wall, because that just wouldn't be helpful. So please, if you do have any questions and you really need some help, you know, if you want me to get on a plane in the middle of the night and come and help you wherever you are in the world, please send me a message. Let's set up a call and get stuck in. So with that said, let's pick up where we were when we left off. So we got up to, there we go. So we got up to the end of the main body of the report, and now we're going to start going through the appendices. Now the appendices has two large sections to it. One is to do with the CCP STAR SDRT report, which is essentially another investigation report embedded inside this one. And then there's also the Boeing ERCCA summary, which is quite short, but that gives you an indication as to what work Boeing were doing. Now, I've not read those sections yet, so it's going to be a surprise to me, as I'm sure it'll be a surprise to you unless you're involved in this kind of stuff. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work through these appendices from A to I, and see where we get to. And then of course I've got another live stream program for Friday, same time, 1800 UTC +1, and then depending how far we get through today and Friday, I'll schedule some more live streams for next week. And I really need to get this case study done because it's been taking up a lot of time, and I really want to get stuck in and do that live session so I can be of service to you, especially if you've been involved in this accident, and you want to get a different perspective on things. Then of course I want to get this finished so I can help. Fantastic. Right, let's check. Is everybody, you've got some people watching, some viewers. Hello viewers, good to see you. Please comment in the chat, let me know you can hear me loud and clear. I trust you can, but you can never be sure with these live streams. It looks like they're all working, which is good. Fantastic. Right, let's go for it. So Appendix A, or Annex A should I say, sorry, Appendix A. There we go. So let's zoom down to here. So this is human factors. Everyone loves human factors. And it's 6 pages long. So we'll see how we get on with getting through that. And as I said, if you do have any questions or you've got any comments or experience that you would like to share, please don't be shy. Get in the chat. Let me know what you think. And if you think I'm talking nonsense, please let's have a conversation about it. But just be mindful, there is about a 30-second to a minute delay between my voice coming out of your computer screen and being able to see your response. So there we go. Right, human factors, everybody. Certainly an important aspect of complex systems and complex programs. Here we go. Right, so the NASA Human Factors Analysis and Classification System, pardon me, NASA HFACS, is a tailored adaptation of the traditional HFACS model, designed specifically to include NASA's unique operational missions and organizational environments. HFACS systematically categorizes the underlying human errors, behaviors, and decisions. And you'll notice, in fact, let me just grab my little jigsaw piece. There we go. So if you've not seen this before, this is what I call a jigsaw piece. This is one of the fundamental principles of what STAMP is all about. So this is essentially a basic control loop. If you've done control engineering, you'll be familiar with you. Essentially, we've got a controller at the top that conceptually controls a controlled process below. Through some form of control actions, it receives feedback from that control process, which updates its process model or beliefs, if we're talking about human being, mental models. And of course, there is a control algorithm, which is essentially a technical term for decision making. So these are the decisions that the controller needs to make, and they are based on information from the process model, the beliefs. So there we go. So when we're talking about the HFACS model, so underlying human errors and behaviors, they are loosely related to the control actions. And then we've got decisions. So of course that's related to the control algorithm, the decision making, and by implication, the beliefs that those decisions are influenced by. There we go. So let's get this back on the screen so you can see it. There we go. And that covers acts to preconditions to supervision. So if we're talking about supervision, you could say that's another layer in the hierarchy above this particular controller we're interested in. And of course, organizational influences. So that could be control actions or due to the structure and behavior of the organization and other controllers within it, enabling a deeper understanding of how and why incidents occur. Fantastic. So it's got very similar goals as cast accident analysis has, and STPA to an extent. This multi-layered approach, so multi-layered approach, that implies layers in a hierarchy, a control structure hierarchy, promotes targeted development of mitigation strategies, illuminating opportunities for mishap prevention, a stronger safety culture, and improved performance, both operational and organizational across the agency. Fantastic. We all like the sound of that. That's brilliant. Okay, so the PIT decision-making team. So I'm going to highlight that as a candidate controller for inclusion in our control structures. So let's put this down here. So let's have a go at that then. PIT decision making team, the DM team. There we go. Right. Conducted interviews, which included 66 people. I mean, they did a lot of interviews. Wow. And they did this alongside their full-time job. Let's not forget that. These people have worked really, really hard. And they should be commended for it. Conducted interviews, which included 66 people from a variety of technical, management, and leadership roles throughout NASA and Boeing. And I just want to draw attention to this little bit here, management and leadership roles. And I might be just reading between the lines where there's no sort of anything to read, but let's just pay attention for a moment. Why would we use the words management and leadership explicitly when often they are used interchangeably? And I would argue leadership is a much more, is a label that represents a much more open attempt to lead a team or a program or whatever it is. And management is much more about control and direction. And yes, they are words that are often used interchangeably, but they can imply a certain culture or a certain behaviour or certain priorities, which I just find interesting. I mean, I'd love to talk to the guys and girls involved in this. I would love to know more what's behind the scenes, and of course, how I could possibly help to sort this out. Because this is this is as serious as it gets without killing people. Okay, the inquiry scope covered a time frame from, excuse me, yeah, I'm zooming about a bit there, sorry. Covered a time frame from CFT launch to CFT return recovery. So that's crew flight test. That's the mission that the crew were on. And it's from launch to CFT return recovery. Now, if the scope only covers that period of time, does it or should it have included the decisions before going for launch? Such as, why would it make sense for leadership or management to decide, yeah, we've got an unqualified spacecraft, we haven't got the test data, we've had some delays from other problems in the program, other investigations that have not really been closed off, but we're going to go flying with some people. Why would it make sense to do that? Why? What is it about their context that would make sense to make that decision? And of course, with hindsight, looking back, is that decision making still sound? Is the process for making that decision still sound? Do we need to go and have a look at that and maybe change how we make decisions in the future? That's what I understood the investigation would look at. But this is a very specific, constrained scope, and I understand why it's constrained that way. But I think there are other contributors from before this point that the inquiry, maybe not this inquiry, but an inquiry should go beyond that, and CAST and STPA could certainly help with that. Right, so every interview was a semi-structured interview with consistent questions, rankings and comments under the 5 organisational domains of organisational structure, culture, communication, team dynamics, and decision making. Now you'll notice, and if you recall, if you go back to some of my earlier live streams, I think it was in the first 10 when we were talking about the early sections of this report. So if I just jump across to here, when we first started talking about it, section 1, 2, and 3, I think during those sections we touched on these criteria and how closely they matched the CAST accident analysis, with some notable gaps. And of course, decision making is very much part of this element of a control loop. Excuse me. So there is some overlap with HVACs, but HVACs looks at things from a different perspective, a more constrained perspective than STAMP, STPA, and CAST does. Interviews occurred from April 2025 through to July 2025. So they did April, May, June, July, 4 months, 66 interviews, and writing a report and doing their normal full-time job. These people they must have been working a lot of hours, a lot of stress. Mapping of narrative interview evidence into the NASA HVACs framework highlights the presence of human factors. The overall analysis of interview statements considers preconditions, supervision, organizational tiers. The acts tiers is not included. Oh, that's interesting. Given this process is a process analysis versus an event analysis, as typically found in a traditional HF investigation report. That is interesting. That is interesting. Why would they do the process analysis as opposed to an event analysis? Maybe they explain that in the later sections. But again, this is interesting because there is a bit of an alignment between STPA and CAST analysis. So CAST is the accident analysis method based on STAMP, and it focuses on a particular event and the specific contributory control actions that led to the accident or loss and the control structure that allowed that. Whereas STPA, system theoretic process analysis, looks at all of the different unsafe control actions that can lead to one or many losses. So it's a much broader, bigger analysis than CAST is. CAST is very focused. But of course, you can use the principles of STPA to supercharge your CAST analysis, and I can show you the details of that in the live workshop. So if you want to join the waiting list for that, I've included a link in the description. Okay, the Starliner mission delays and uncrewed return were caused by a mix of technical issues as well as human and organizational factors. Most NASA interviewees agreed that returning the crew on Dragon was ultimately the right decision, while many Boeing employees disagreed. See, that's very interesting. Downplaying the technical risks. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, so just bear with me a second. I'm going to focus on this here. So, Boeing employees disagreed, downplaying the technical risks. Downplaying the technical risks is a judgment by the investigators, the interviewers, of the information provided them by Boeing employees. And of course, that judgment is hindsight, potentially affected by hindsight bias, because it's only after the event that we're investigating. So something's happened, something bad. And of course, we're viewing the opinions of these employees and their view of the technical risks with that hindsight bias. And so from the Boeing employees' perspective, they disagree. They thought the risks were less. And that might be a genuinely held belief based on the evidence available to them. Again, the question, one of the questions that you must emphasize when you're doing any kind of stamp-based analysis is, why would it make sense? Why would it make sense for reasonable, competent people to make those decisions and take those actions? People don't generally come to work every day to try and hurt people themselves or kill others. That's generally not what people do from a safety perspective. Now, of course, there's always the conspiracy element of it, is that there could be an adversary trying to undermine the program and all of this good stuff. And then, I'm being sort of conspiratorial there, but the point is, when you're doing an investigation, you have to be open to the possibility that people are trying to do the right thing and they just happen to end up with a negative outcome. Or there could be elements of something more sensitive or, concerning going on. I'm not saying that is the case in this case, but when you're an investigator, you have to be open to both sides of that, and you have to base your judgments on the evidence that's available. You have to balance these things and always be open to these odd possibilities. So I don't think it's fair to say that Boeing employees disagreed, downplaying the technical risks. I think that's a value judgment. And if you ask those employees, they may have had a genuine reason to say that the risks were as they were. So let's just be a bit mindful about the language we use in our investigation reports. Of course, I could be talking complete nonsense, and that's exactly what was going on. But the content of this report isn't detailed enough to really explain that. Does that make sense? Does that sort of ring how you would see it? Comment below. Let me know what you think. These differing risk perspectives persist today. So they still persist today. So is it what is going on? What is the mental models of the stakeholders involved? Why would it make sense to believe these things, especially when there's other contrary evidence? What's going on there? This is a human factors question. This is what the human factors analysis should go and look at. Let's find out. Maybe it talks about it in the next sections. So the differing risks perspectives persist even today. Fantastic. Addressing organisational issues such as expectations, assumptions and requirements offers a critical path forward to preventing future human and organisational factors from exacerbating performance problems and improving overall mission safety. NASA HVAC's four hierarchical tiers exist. There we go. So, the word hierarchy's in there, everybody. Hierarchy. Within the HVAC's model, each representing a different level of human influence. So it's about humans. This model is about the humans, not a combination of humans, organizations, technology, or processes, which is what the control structure model, stamp control structure model can cover. So again, this is this is like looking through a keyhole at a control structure model. Three of the four tiers were assessed. So 3 out of 4 tiers were assessed for their role in the Starliner crew flight test analysis. The figure below shows the 4 HVACs tiers and their associated subcategories, highlighted which were found to be present from the interviews. Right, that's interesting. Subcategories highlighted which were found to be present from the interviews. Right. So, first off, this statement here, there are 4 tiers were 3 of the 4 tiers were assessed for their role in the Starliner crew flight test analysis. It might just be American English versus UK English. I'm trying to understand, what is the topic? Is it the Starliner crew flight test analysis that this report reports on and contains, so the accident analysis? Or is it the analysis that was done by the program prior to making the decision to go flying on the crew flight test mission? Which of those is it? And I know earlier on it says they're focused on the takeoff and landing and everything between, so not the decision to take off in the first place. But it's just a bit ambiguous. Maybe it's just because I'm English. There we go. Okay, the figure below shows the 4 HVACs tiers and their associated subcategories, highlighted which were found to be present from the interviews. Okay, so let's just have a look. Let's start at the bottom. So we've got figure 77. Right, figure 77, NASA HVACs tier descriptions with subcategories highlights. So before I go down there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my little jigsaw piece and I'm going to put it right next to it so we can see how there is an alignment or some gaps. So first off, ACS. Let me get it on the screen. It's a bit difficult to see there, isn't it? There we go. Let's put it like that. Right. So first tier, and there's 4 tiers, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first tier of HVACs, the NASA version, we've got behavioural omissions and commissions committed by an individual or a team. So that sounds very much like control actions to me. So in fact, there's another slide I need that I prepared earlier. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. That's the one I wanted. Right. Come over here. Let's go down here. No, I'm giving so much away. I should probably charge for these live streams. Comment below how much you'd pay for these live streams. Or if you wouldn't, give me some feedback. Right, let's just have a look. So, actually, I better just undo. Simon, what are you doing? Oh, God. What are you doing? There we go. Right, let me just, I'll put a border around this. Border. Let's put a border around it. So, there we go. Right, group. So let's just have a look for a second then. So we're saying here, behavioural omissions and commissions. So these are things that are not done when they should be, and things that are done that perhaps shouldn't be done. Now, funnily enough, that sounds like not provided from our types of contributory or unsafe control actions. So their control action is not provided. The behavioral aspect, the act is omitted, or it is committed. So there we go, provided, not provided. So we've got some complete overlap between STPA, CAST and HVACs, which is not unexpected. Then it says decision making. Wow, hang on a minute, Simon, that's in your little jigsaw piece. Yes, it is. There we go. So decision making is mentioned. What I'll do is I'll get a little green pen. Everyone loves a green pen, don't they? Right, so omissions and commissions, they're included in STAMP. Decision making, yeah, that is as well. Oh, skill-based. Right, so skill-based is related to the capability of the controller, which is a combination of decision making, beliefs, and their ability to get stuff done. So that is included, but it's not explicit in this picture. It's not explicit in this model, but it is implied. Perception. Perception. What does that sound like? Well, that is a combination, everybody, of a mental model, beliefs, and some feedback. And it could be, if you were looking at a more advanced control structure model with other, like, actually, I've got the picture. Stand by, let me grab it. I'm here talking about it. I might as well show the picture. There it is. That's the one I wanted. Look at that. It's almost like I prepared for this. Right, there we go. No. Further down, there we go. Zoom in. Let's put a board around it. Border. There we go. Right. So it's saying here, let's make sure it's big enough on your screen. So perception could be, we've got this controller here controlling this process, and their mental model, their beliefs, their perceptions could be shaped by other controllers, such as leadership. Leadership have said something or not said something, that's led to a perception. Maybe there are other controllers that are coordinating or distracting this controller and shaping perceptions. So perception is in there. Maybe it's not as explicit as decision making, but it's there. So let's get some green pen. Green pen, there we go. And then compliance. Ooh, compliance. How does that fit into it? Well, I suppose it's a combination of individual taking actions and having feedback and updating their mental models about the things they've done and whether they are meeting expectations. But it's also a combination of these other controllers that are involved. So this leader, are they checking that this controller's done what they need to do? Pardon me, does that leader have necessary feedback about the control process to be able to do that? In this picture, they don't. Did they have in reality? What about this other controller? Is this, supporting this controller to do whatever it's doing? Does it have necessary feedback? So compliance, feedback, interactions, coordination. It's definitely there, but it's not explicit in the same way that HVACs does it. There we go. So we've got the ACTS level sorted out then. Right, let's have a look at preconditions. So environmental factors or conditions of individuals matching performance, impacting for environmental factors or conditions of individuals impacting performance. So we've both got environmental factors and individual factors. Right, let's just talk about the environmental factors for a second. And it's important to recognize I'm not digging into the causal scenario analysis of STPA in this in these live streams, because it takes up a lot of time to do that. I'm here to focus on the Starliner, and I'm not here to teach everything about STPA and CAST. It's about the Starliner. But let's just focus a minute. So this says environmental factors: physical environment, technological environment, space environment, information environment. And I think that's one of the additions for NASA. I don't typically think that's in a normal HVACs analysis. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So yeah, when we're doing a STPA Step 2 analysis, or we're doing a CAST analysis and looking at the specific controller, we would explore, well, what are the reasons that might impact the behavior of the controller from a physical perspective? You know, is it too hot, too cold? You know, I'm absolutely baking, sweating to death today in my back cave. It's just ridiculously hot again. Um, is it to do with sleep deprivation or blood sugar levels or some other, you know, kind of issue? Maybe stress, high cortisol levels, and all of those exciting things. So these are included in STPA, but we look at them as part of step 2 of the STPA analysis phase. And of course, when we're doing a cast analysis, we look at it as part of the controller analysis uh, phase part, should I say. So yeah, we do all of those if you want to. Technological environment and information environment. Again, that's related to the couple of things. Human machine interface between the controller and the control process, the actuators and sensors, the control path and the feedback path. Maybe it's to do with coordination of other controllers and the interface and the feedback. Maybe it's to do with the technology itself, you know, the type of technology, how it's manufactured. And of course, if we're talking about an information environment, this is about information flows around the control structure and how it influences the mental model, the beliefs of the human and their decision making. So yeah, it's in there. It is mentioned. So we've got greens on all of those. I really should cut this into a separate video, HVACs versus STPA and cast. Maybe I should do. Comment below. Tell me if you'd think that would be helpful, chopping this video down and including it as part of a separate video. Individual factors. So let's have a look at this. So psychological, physiological, medical, perceptual, fitness and readiness. So those three are certainly part of STPA STPA analysis phase part 2. So when we explore the specific controller and the impacts upon it. In the guidebook, the handbook, it's not necessarily as explicit as this. It is implied. But of course, if you're using these methods and you have human factors people available, they'll know all of these and will add these things intuitively anyway. Just like if you had an FMEA expert or a physics of failure expert, they would enrich the STPA analysis phase part 2, STPA step 4, you might know it as. So yeah, they're all in there. In terms of perception, that's a combination of mental models, decision making and feedback, sensory feedback, or the provision of information from others or human machine interfaces, for example. So yeah, that's all in there. Supervision then, let's have a talk about supervision. So this is not necessarily about the direct controller. This is about the supervision of that controller or supervision of the control process if you want to go that far. So let's have a look at our control loop then. So we've got methods, decisions, or policies of the supervisory chain of command, oversight, planning, accountability, supervisory compliance. So you could say that oversight is essentially a closed loop, feedback loop. Control actions, you know, we need to audit you, let's check you, let's get some feedback. Is that appropriate or not? Yes or no? Is the controller fulfilling its responsibilities? Yes or no? Is there any other feedback that leadership, that supervisor needs? This model doesn't include that feedback path. The reason is to force you to remember and ask that question: what feedback does the supervisor have that's independent of the controller? Because the controller could be lying. The controller could be providing information it believes to be true that's not actually true. You know, so the supervisor should have its own independent feedback in some shape or form. Planning, so that is about the control algorithm of the supervisor, the decision making, and that of course is based on a mental model or process model, which will be influenced by feedback or coordination from other controllers perhaps. Accountability. Now, accountability is interesting because there is a difference between responsibility and accountability, because a controller could be responsible and accountable for something, but they don't have the means to be able to satisfy that responsibility or accountability. And they might not even realize that until they have to step up and get involved. So, of course, there's the definition of responsibility and accountability, which a supervisor logically needs to do. So that's decision making and process model and control algorithm. But the other control algorithms related to that are communicating responsibility and accountability, getting feedback that that has been taken on board and fulfilled, or that the capability is there to be able to do that. And of course, the supervisor has some responsibility to provide resources to make sure that capability is available. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how responsible or accountable a controller is if they don't have the necessary resources, or they are in a hotspot in a position where they cannot fulfill those responsibilities through no fault of their own. Then that is the responsibility of the supervisor to take care of that, arguably. Okay, supervisory compliance. So we've already talked a bit about that already. So you could say it's about the supervisor checking the controller and their behaviors and the behavior of the control process. But there's also an implied who checks the checker? Who supervises the supervisor? Is there another loop above this one to make sure the supervisor is doing what it's supposed to do? And I'd argue that should be necessary in all safety critical systems. Okay, so we've talked about that. That's in there. Not as explicit as this, but again, it is in there. Organisation, climate and culture. Yes, that is certainly mentioned, especially in CAST. Latent conditions embedded within the organisation, operations. So this is an interesting one, because when we say operations, are we referring to the operational control structure? And so this doesn't really think broad enough about the design, development, test and qualification control structure and the response and recovery control structure. Or is it that this organisation in this context it's also about operations, but when you talk about design, development, qualification, and test, arguably that is an operations control structure, but in that context, and the same for response and recovery. Because I'd argue the emergency services, for example, they will refer to themselves as an operation control structure, but they are in the context of themselves, not their customers, so to speak, their clients. So yeah, so we've got all of those in there. And resources. So resources is a type of control action, you could say. The provision of adequate resources, whatever type of resources you're referring to. If you're talking about a computer controller, resources could be electrical power. It could be cooling or heating. It could be radiation protection. If we're talking about a human being, it could be making sure they've got adequate rest. They're not being burnt out. They're not being asked to do an investigation and interview 66 people in the case of 4 months alongside a day job. Do you see what I'm saying here? Comment below. Let me know what you think. There we go. So in a nutshell, HVACs and STPA and CAST can fit together, but STPA gives you a broader framework and a more structured framework to really dig into the specifics of a control loop and then the broader contribution from the safety control structure. So again, if you're already using HVACs, you will love to use STPA as well. The only little thing I would caution is the focus on, what do they call it? Slipped my mind. There is a model used in civil air transport I'm aware of called the FAIR model. And it has a flowchart in it to describe whether the acts of an individual are, genuine slips and mistakes and all of that good stuff, or whether they are bad people that should be punished. And so we have to be really careful with that kind of mindset and language and vocabulary, because the point of STPA and CAST is to uncover what must the control structure do to mitigate, eliminate the hazard or respond and recover to its consequences. We're not here to point fingers and blame people. We're here to understand why the system allowed these accidents or losses to occur. And it's not helpful to be blaming people, pointing fingers and punishing them. Don't get me wrong, there may be a place for those kind of things in very specific circumstances, but we're all adults. We should be treated with respect, and punishment should be an absolute last resort for very specific circumstances. That's my personal view on it. Let me know what you think. So yeah, I've talked to death about that. I've talked about unsafe control actions. Do I want to talk now? I think I've done that enough, to be honest. And that was just page 1. That was like 40 minutes of... Yeah, let me know if you thought that was helpful. I'll just have a quick drink and check the comments, see if everyone's fallen asleep. Yes, I'll chop that up and make that a smaller video. Right, here we go. So here is the human factors analysis. This is at the organizational level. So let me just steal my. There we go. That's what I want. One of those. Let's steal that. Put that down here so you can see better. Right. So this is the organizational tier. That's that section. And then we've got the supervision tier just there. Look. And then we've got the preconditions tier. There we go. And then the technical tier is missing, and that's what it says just there. Oh, sorry, acts. Yeah, that was it. The acts were missing. I need to remember that because I'm going to forget. 3 of the 4. So it's these. Hang on. Let's use my highlight pen. Like this. There we go. Right. Duplicate. I'll put it there. Pardon me, duplicate over there. That's wrong, isn't it? There we go. That's it. Right. Organization, supervision, and preconditions. So it's just those 3 levels, not the acts. But I'm hoping you can see you could use cast STPA to look at acts. That's the main focus of the control loop. So why they've not done that, I don't know. It doesn't kind of make sense. But of course, if they were to revisit it with STPA or cast, you could go to town on those bits. And if you've got, what is it, 66... where is it? 66 people they interviewed. Where does it say that? There it is, 66. I need to highlight that because I'm going to forget. There we go, 66, click-to-click. 66 people were interviewed. There we go. That's amazing. And it was all done in 4 months. Right, sorry, I'm getting distracted. Right, here we go. So then, organisational... I mean, this is the top, isn't it? Should we go to the bottom first and work backwards, or should we just... No. Let's just do the organise. Let's do top down. You see, the reason I asked that question is when you do a control structure model, of course it's hierarchy. The convention is abstract, high-level control leadership, and then the closer you go to the bottom, the closer it gets to reality, real time, the physical process where energy is transferred, and the direct controllers. So that's where that's where the harm occurs. So if you're doing an investigation, you typically start from that physical process and work upwards and outwards from what happened. Whereas the HVACs model in this context is forcing the writer, the journalist, to put the organisational tier first. And I'm just wondering whether that could subtly undermine consideration of how these accidents could occur. But that's an academic consideration that maybe we could talk about another time. Okay, so the HVAC's organisational tier encompasses 3 subcategories. So culture, climate, which we've already talked about, operations, and resources. This tier captures the shared organisational attitudes, processes, and resources that impact mission success. PIT interviews revealed numerous examples of deficits, red lights, RL, in all 3 organisation categories, as well as successes, green light, GL. Okay. Not sure I understand what that means, but anyway. Or, what it would be... Sorry, I'm going off at a tangent. Wouldn't it be nice if this bit about introduction to NASA HVACs, it referenced the actual procedure that is used for that study, if that is available publicly? Wouldn't it be nice if we could find that and go and look at it? Anyway, I know I banged on about referencing yesterday on Monday, so I won't continue banging on about that. Right, organisational climate culture. The organisational climate culture category focuses on systemic influences of culture, climate, and relationships, and trust. The culture refers to the long-standing shared attitudes, values, beliefs, or morale that impact operations and/or operational risk. You see, there it is. It's focusing on impacting on operations. So does that mean people working in an office doing design work and doing testing and qualification? Is that within the label, the scope of the concept that label is trying to touch on? Rhetorical question, maybe. Climate describes the more short-term expectations and behaviours of the group. The contractor relationships unique to NASA. Hang on a minute. Contractor relationships unique to NASA HVACs is included to acknowledge the critical effect of commercial parties and the agency on joint shared assurance on mission implementation success. Culture. Differences in cultures were noted in the interviews. Attitudes within Boeing and NASA varied regarding expectations, testing, and timelines. Additionally, different perceptions between NASA Crew Commercial Program and the technical authority became evident. Trust eroded as conflicts increased and went unresolved. So if conflicts are happening and they went unresolved, who or what is responsible for resolving it? Why was that not done? Why did it make sense? Green light. Most NASA witnesses remarked that while messy, ultimately NASA procedures, culture of technical rigor, and valuing crew life given unknown technical performance prevailed. In the end, we did the right thing. Well, the right thing was not allowing the thing to take off in the first place, I think. But anyway. Climate. Team decision-making, communication and collaborations were hindered due to poor team dynamics, which was the result of heightened stress and decreased morale. So again, the question is, who controls the stress? Who controls morale? Individually, we control our own stress levels and our morale, but it is heavily influenced by the performance and behaviours of others and the organisation, the nature of the work we do, and even the nature of the documentation and nonsense we have to deal with. And I highly recommend a stress management program for everybody so they can learn about themselves and how stress affects them and how they can manage their response to stress. And again, there's a difference between stress and then chronic stress and how that affects your body, your health and welfare. And I do think organizations really do need to get a hold of that, especially in these kind of high stakes programs. If you've got a lot of unwell, stressed people, how can they perform at their best? You know, that really needs to be on the risk register and properly managed and controlled. And I'm not saying the aim is to get rid of stress. That's not what I'm saying. But again, I'm not here to teach you about stress and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole load of people, coaches out there, books out there about stress and eustress and all that kind of stuff. But it is important, especially in a complex program like this. Right. Of course. And of course, if you're stressing people out, they're going to get sick more. They're going to not want to come to work. They're not going to do as good a job as they could possibly could. And you're going to get staff turnover. You know, it's inevitable and it's difficult to get good people at the best of times. And if you're stressing them out and burning them out, then, you know. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse. That's a topic that's very close to my heart. It's so important in safety management. and especially safety engineering management, management of a safety engineering team, because they can be very susceptible to stress. I'm not saying no one else is, I'm just saying they have a very particular predisposition to it. Okay, right, here we go. Contractor relations. While historically challenged, going into the anomaly phase, the anomaly phase, it's an interesting label, the relationship between NASA and Boeing experienced strain. The degraded relationship between some NASA and Boeing personnel was reportedly exacerbated by strong personalities in meetings. Yeah, I mean that nonsense needs getting a hold of and dealing with appropriately. That strong personalities, that you need strong leaders, totally get that. But if you've got people behaving in inappropriate ways, that needs to be knocking on the head sooner rather than later and dealt with in an appropriate way. Yes. Okay. Organizational operations. The organizational operations category refers to systemic issues within the operation structure and governance which influence operational safety and mission performance. This category includes assessment of how organizational processes, management training, and those associated deficiencies contribute to risk at the mission or task level. Organizational structure. A recurring theme in multiple interviews was the confusion over roles, responsibilities, and decision-making authority. Unstructured meetings contributed to communication breakdowns and perceived lack of organizational integration between Boeing and NASA further impacted team cohesion. Yeah, so that's leadership. All problems are leadership problems. If that's what, because this is, yes, it's under the topic of organizational structure, but it's not just the structure. It's about this. It's about the structure, the interactions amongst those components, amongst those controllers. So confusion over roles. That is about structure, of course, but it's about the perception and beliefs of the people within it. So if they believe or are not sure what their roles and responsibilities are, what is the control structure? What is the layer above them, the leadership, doing to make sure that they understand what the structure is? And if the structure is not explicit, for whatever reason, it needs to be made explicit and communicated. And it needs to be clear who has what roles and responsibilities, and especially decision-making authority. So this is a leadership issue, not really just an organizational structure issue. That is a symptom of an inadequate leadership aspect. Unstructured meetings. So this is how we control meetings, how we control the flow of information, and especially defining who has what roles and responsibilities and authority. So again, how do we conduct meetings? Who decides that? Is it a committee or is it an individual? Is it a procedure? What is it? Who controls the meetings? Who makes sure they're structured properly? From a pre-meeting perspective, and then who referees and chairs the meeting? Because in my view, you have the administration of a important high-stakes technical meeting, and then you have the players, you have the chairperson and everyone else. And that the chairperson shouldn't necessarily be one of the senior engineers making the decisions, is what I'm saying. You should have a referee, and then you should have the players. And if you haven't got that in the meeting, that needs to be fed back to somebody who has the power to make sure it happens properly. And if they haven't acted to it, then the question is, well, why? What changes need to be made? Okay, so between perceived, yeah, we've talked about that. Okay, operational tempo. Here we go. Pressure to work towards decision need dates that were yeah. Oh God, this is a bugbear of mine. Flipping heck, I hate this. Pressure to work towards decision need dates that were continually pushed out led to the workforce to become chronically fatigued over time. Chronically fatigued is a very polite way to put it. The amount of time I've had conversations with project managers about ridiculous dates that just annoy everybody. They'll ask for dates. You give them dates. They don't like the dates because they don't fit with their understanding of the program. You tell them that they are as realistic as they can be. You tell them whether you have any fat in them or not, and they just don't like the dates. And so in the end, you're just like, well, either have some made up dates because they don't matter, just leave me alone, or here are some ridiculous dates that are so good news that then the project manager leaves you alone, you know, and then you end up that they end up with a mental model of the program which is completely different to the reality, and then they live in that unreal situation, and senior management then become disconnected from the realities of the project. So there is, there's an interplay between the people doing the work and know the reality on the ground, and then you've got an in-between layer that, depending on their capabilities, competence, and behaviours, can cause all manner of stress on everybody. And yeah, anyway, let's not relive that. Right, the quantity of meetings also increased after unanticipated anomalies were encountered, which made it difficult to get the proper experts to all meetings, further hindering communication and team interaction. Yes, absolutely. You end up with individuals who are hotspots that just end up at all meetings, and they've got work to actually do, and yet they're just demanded to go to meetings. And like I mentioned in the last live stream with Alex Hormozy and Layla Hormozy's videos about maker time and manager time. So how to schedule, how to construct your working day, your working week, how to manage your energy and your focus to do creative work versus administrative work and management work, and how managers and makers need to interact with each other in a respective way. Because, of course, the proper experts, they're really the creatives, they're the makers. But if you've got managers trying to manage a problem and manage a program, getting in the way and making a nuisance of themselves, we shouldn't be surprised people are getting a bit burnt out and a bit fatigued, to put it politely. So managing maker time and manager time is a critical thing. Anyway, right. So one interview used the word chaotic. That's a very polite word, in my experience, to describe the operational pace for everyone trying to work towards the finish line of getting the vehicle undocked. This is, you see, we've got people in space attached to the International Space Station, and it's chaotic. What would you say that the Formula One racing teams that swap tyres in the pits in 10 seconds, would you say what they do is chaotic? Or would you say it's more of a ballet of well-practiced professionals doing exactly what they need to do and have drilled it over and over again, and so it looks effortless? I don't know. Rhetorical question, Simon. There we go. This is also related to issues brought up regarding communication of unrealistic launch dates. Yes, and the consequences on the workforce and crew morale. Yes. This is a problem with all programs. And again, it's that layer of leadership that are not necessarily close enough to the actual work to understand what's going on, or they're just not able to understand it. Because this is complex work. If you're not an engineer or you've not done the work before, you can't really expect them to understand it. But then the question becomes, who or what is in the organization that should make sure that intermediate level of program management, project management, actually is competent and understands the beast that they're dealing with, and that behaving in this way can really screw a program up and potentially kill people? I think that should be part of an MBA course or something if it's not already. And again, the impact of, bullshit, excuse my French, dates, magical dates, that dates don't mean anything. You'll just get beaten up by the project manager anyway, so just give them a load of nonsense dates. Or just ignore the emails, stop talking to them. You've got work to do, leave us alone. Anyway, operational risk management. Potential issues identified years prior, there we go, look, were not addressed. Why? Why? Who or what is this controller that's not addressing these potential issues identified years prior? They must have known about them. These are the issues that communicated years prior. So why did it make sense for them not to do anything about them? Yes, it indicates a failure of risk management processes. No, it doesn't. No. This is a. How can I put this? That statement indicates failure of risk management processes at the organizational level that gives a get out of jail free card to whoever or whatever is in that layer of the hierarchy. Oh, it's a failure of the risk management process. No, it's not a failure of the risk management process. It is down to a contributory control action by somebody or some group of people, some organization that's made decisions based on some beliefs, based on feedback, or from direction from above. Maybe it was from a process. Maybe the risk management criteria says that for these conditions, we can ignore them, it's acceptable, whatever it is. But this investigation needs to get to the bottom of that. Otherwise, it's a lost opportunity. We're going to have another one of these and kill some people. This is a. In my view, this is not acceptable. This needs to be absolutely explored. We need to go to town on that one. We need to go to town on it, and I can't write. It'd help if I used my pen, wouldn't it? There we go. Let's get my pen out. That is, if it does, if the investigation report doesn't recommend to dig into that, then all of this is great, but it's not gone far enough. We need to nail that down. Out of all the recommendations, nailing that down is one of the most important. Right. So, explore, investigate further. The other thing I want to say about this bit is that obviously this is basically, well, cast, stamp, and STPA allows you to shine a massive spotlight on this part of the organization. And that part of the organization is probably not used to it. Some of them are probably not going to like it because it requires a lot of humility to hold your hands up and say, yes, I provided or didn't provide some control actions for whatever genuine reasons. There might be some really genuine reasons. It's not always somebody's an idiot or they're incompetent or they're evil. That's not what it always is. It might be, but I don't think it's that. They were probably trying to do the best that they possibly could in the circumstances. So let's go and explore that. Let's investigate it. Let's empower leadership to be able to lead a program and make it a success and make it safe. Let's just not miss the opportunity by, oh, well, it was the risk management process. No. That's we need to go farther than that. That is what STAMP is all about. I'll get back off my high horse now. Sorry. Right. After Starliner docked to the ISS, ongoing circumstances weighing risk became contentious and lengthy. An interview noted the use of engineering. Yay, let's use engineering judgment. What the hell does that mean? Where does that come from? Did you pull it out of you? Anyway. As a foundation for moving forward without engineering data, which indicates inadequate risk assessment. Yes, that most certainly does. And as a young safety engineer, when I questioned that engineering judgment, I was basically told, I'm the engineer, I'm the chief engineer, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Why are you questioning me? Stop questioning me. I've decided. Write it down, let's go. Okay. Right. I've been around a bit. That's why I've got no hair left. That's why I'm not a cultural fit. Anyway, let's keep going. Program management and oversight. Unclear leadership roles. There we go. Were described across most interviews. Of 66 interviews, actually, this is the thing. Wouldn't it be nice to have a control structure model that shows where those interviewees were located? So there were some Boeing people, some NASA people, some CCP people. Wouldn't it be nice to have a control structure and know where you've interviewed people from? Which controller were they related to? Which control actions and feedback were they related to? Because not only that, it will show you, if you look at your control structure model, it'll show you where the gaps are, who you've not interviewed that you really perhaps should. Coverage you should have interviewed a representative from each of the controllers in your control structure. And if you haven't got that, then you haven't finished your investigation. God, it's hot in here. It is absolutely baking, honestly. I'm gonna have to get aircon or something. I'll get one of those flying suits with the tubes that circulate hot water, cold water, like the U-2 pilots, SR-71 pilots used to have. Anyway, here we go. A lack of clarity around the decision-making authority further indicated breakdowns at the program management level for both Boeing and NASA. Additional oversight issues include the observation that Boeing appeared to limit inputs from individuals regarding potential issues with the vehicle, thereby controlling additional work and schedule impacts. That is also a topic that should be investigated further. And I've had this happen to me a few times over the years. Oh, you're generating too much work for people to do. We haven't got the time or budget to deal with it. That's not my problem. That is your design. Your design, your inadequate program management and analysis is generating the work. I'm just shining a light on it for you. If you want to shoot the messenger, shoot the messenger. I've been shot many times. I've got lots of arrows in my back. So let's write on this. This one must be explored and it must be resolved, because that behaviour, whilst it, from a program project management, that's the thing you want them to do to limit impacts on cost and schedule, but it is fundamentally opposed to the safety and safety culture of the program. So again, there needs to be a recommendation to nail that down. And I'd also, there's organisational learning from this as well, and industry learning. And I'd go so far as to say this topic and the learning you could get from it is applicable to every major program, in all industries, defence, aerospace, the whole shooting match. Because this is a common program management controller behaviour, so let's learn from this. Let's write some books on this, on how to solve this problem. This problem exists everywhere. Let's nail it down and kill it. Personal changes were made by replacing key individuals who were creating barriers to effective teamwork. This swap out made improvements in relationships by fostering a more composed and cooperative working environment. Okay. So personnel changes is a control action. And the way this paints it, it sounds like disruptive individuals who were having a negative impact for whatever reason have been replaced. But is it that they have been painted as negative have been painted or implied as disruptive, or where is it? Where's the word? I'm reading between the lines here. It could be, on one hand, there were some disruptive people that were not, they were not doing a good thing, so they were moved on. But it could be that there were some people doing a good thing, trying to do the right thing, trying to draw attention to safety issues and get support to deal with them, and they were just squashed and thrown out. Now, if it's the latter, that really needs to be nailed down and sorted. And the people that are doing retributive firings or whatever, they should be fired. If that's the kind of nonsense behaviour we've got, they should be made an example of as well. That is my personal opinion based on some past experience where, anyway, yes. When people are trying to do the right thing, they should be supported. Because if you squash the people trying to do the right thing, that has an absolute chilling effect on the safety culture of everybody else. And they will be quiet, they won't say anything, they will do exactly as required, and they will not hold or take responsibility for things. They will push the responsibility back to those decision makers that are cracking the whip. And that is a very, very dangerous position to be in. Anyway, maybe not for those leaders, those toxic leaders, and that is something that needs to be addressed, unfortunately, post-accident. And in my view, there should be significant consequences for that. Anyway, fingers crossed, nothing bad happens. Publications, written guidance. Witnesses describe a lack of established guidance or protocols for the determining who owns specific decision-making capabilities, especially during stages of flight and event anomalies. Okay, so that's that's part of the control structure. That's inadequate. That's an issue that needs to have recommendations to solve it. Organizational training interviews. Indicated there was a technical. Training simulations and coordination efforts. However, there was a lack of training for how to handle high-risk, time-critical anomalies, e.g. enhanced simulation training for unplanned anomalies. Yes, I mean, that is something that is necessary for these kind of programs, unfortunately. It's a necessary expense. Because you're going to run out of people. If you keep burning them out and giving them PTSD, they're not going to come and work for you. We're not going to go to Mars or go to the stars if we don't sort this kind of stuff out. Organizational resources. Organizational resources refers to the availability and management of the physical personnel and financial resources. There we go. That answers that question familiar. Management, availability and management of the physical personnel and financial resources provided by an organization to support operations. So that's the control actions from whoever they are. Personnel. Witnesses described critical positions as being in short supply. Yes, well, of course they are. Who would want to do a job where you're going to get stressed like crazy and, Anyway, understanding of Boeing and NASA personnel was an issue due to various reasons, such as personnel being shared between two commercial providers, high workloads, and the limited number of SMEs. And inadequate stress management, inadequate leadership, inadequate safety culture, inadequate trust. There's loads of stuff you could talk about in there. Anyway, funding. Concern was expressed over the acquisition contract. Contract vehicle and subsequent downstream effects. So if concern was expressed, who was that? Who or what was providing that feedback back up the tree, and what was done about it or not done, and why? Why would it make sense? And subsequent downstream effects on personnel, parts, equipment, design, schedule, decision-making, meeting size, and frequency, authority, relationship between NASA and Boeing, and information required, thresholds, and deadlines. Yeah, I mean, that's like all the feedback. But what was done about it? Who provided it? Under what context? How many times? What was the response? Why did the response make sense or not? What was done? Let's close the loop on that exam question. Again, that's an important topic that needs to be nailed down, as is personnel. We need to go further on this. Somebody needs to go further on this. Material parts. Interviewees acknowledge known hardware issues were accepted prior to launch. Examples were offered where experts demonstrated they didn't fully understand existing technical system issues, e.g. flying thrusters out of qualification. I mean, it just, again, this bit, it's not necessarily about the parts themselves. It's about the decision makers. Why did they make decisions like that? And why was it accepted? What was the justification? What do we need to change for the future to prevent this kind of nonsense from happening again? Equipment was identified as a factor during interviews. Examples included organizational decision-making and knowledge related to equipment, such as limited Boeing hardware availability, test facility resources, and the pace of hardware testing. One interview highlighted that hardware testing worked well once a clear goal was identified and the team worked together to execute appropriately. Again, it's like this report is saying all these things, and then my immediate thought is, well, so what? Okay, you've identified an issue, so what? What are we going to do about it? What else do we need to do to understand it and solve the problem? It's like, here's some problems. Thank you very much. It just doesn't make sense. No, it does, because they were doing it part-time and they were doing it as quick as they could. So I suppose there's some recommendations for the investigation itself and how to conduct investigations. I think that's what we're sort of pushing at. Design. Questions regarding organisational review and acceptance of the design were raised in several interviews, followed by failed attempts to get more information or dismissal by Boeing. Okay. So this is as a system safety engineer, my biggest question is, how the heck could you have a design in a state as that going flying with people on board? What was going on with the design organization, and why did they make decisions the way they did? And then the next question is, well, how did the decision maker between the handover between the designer, developer, the tester, and the people that are going to go and operate this thing? What was the handover? What was the bridge that they had to cross to deal with that? You know, we need to explore, we need to understand that. And again, when you build the control structure model and start asking these kind of questions, it shows you where you need to go and investigate. You know, these things can't hide. These are evident when you start thinking about things through the concept of a control structure. You know, this is one of the powerful things about, you know, this method, these methods. You know, once you've drawn it out on a piece of paper, and it take me 10 seconds to do it. You know, just draw it out. What about this? What about that? What about that? What about that? Job done. And then go and find the information for that. Go and talk to people. And then when you need to iterate the model and add detail, you can do that and then ask the same questions. Operational information. Interviews cited numerous examples of lack of adequate operational information. This included information requests, the communication exchange, and sharing of technical information between various teams. Okay, so why? Why was that? What are you going to do about it? What are the recommendations? Fantastic. Right, let's just have a look. So we've got two more to do. We've got supervision tier and we've got preconditions tier. And I think, what time is it? 7:20. So I've been going on for quite a while. I think what you should do is have a break and come back on Friday and continue with these two sections. And I think by the end of Friday, we could have finished this. But yeah, that's really interesting, that, for me. I hope, I hope that was interesting for you. Again, if you've got any questions, comments, concerns about this case study, or about the things that you do, about how Stamp and STPA or CAST could help you, or if you're trying to do one of these things and you're finding it difficult and you just want a second opinion on something, get in touch. Send me a message via direct message or visit my website on Whiteley-Safety.co.uk. Click the green button. I need help now. Send me a message. Let's have a conversation. So yeah, fantastic. Right. Have a great evening, and we'll see you on Friday. Same time, 1800 UTC +1. And make sure to bring your refreshments, your friends, your colleagues, your pets, and we'll have a great time talking about safety and Stamp. Have a good night. Take care.